We'll just let people keep joining, but I'll kick off now because I'm conscious we've got a lot to get through in the next hour. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Happy Occupational Health Awareness Week. In line with the SOM, we are hosting From Firefighting to Future-Proofing, Why Strategic OH is Your Hidden HR Superpower. So lovely of you all to join us this afternoon. I'm just going to run through a little bit of housekeeping. So the session is recorded, and please look out for an email tomorrow where you'll get a link to the recording, and you can send that to colleagues, peers, whoever, to catch up on today's session. Just to let you know as well, you're not visible at all to anybody throughout the webinar. So what you can see on your screen is all we can see and all everyone else can see. So please feel free to relax, eat your lunch, do whatever. We can't see you. We always make time for the Q&A at the end. So please, can I just draw your attention to the two little function buttons at the bottom of your screen? So there's the Q&A function. If you've got any questions that you'd like our panelists to answer, please drop them in the Q&A bit. We'll do our very best to get to those at the end. There is also the little chat function as well. So a lot of our webinars, we do get quite a lot of engagement in the chat. If you've got any just general comments, feedback, best practice throughout, please feel free to engage in the chat function as well with other audience members and the panelists. And I will go over now to introduce you to our expert panel. So I'll hand over to you first, Alex, if you'd just like to say hello and introduce yourself.
Yep, thanks, Nicole. I'm not sure I'm totally comfortable with describing as an expert, but I'll do my best. They're very good. Yeah, I'm Alex Goldsmith. I'm the Chief Executive of Medigold. So I've been, for my sins, operating in and around occupational health and how that works with and interacts with, leadership teams, HR teams for the best part of 20 years. So I'll do my best to add some value. Katie?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I'm Katie Werry. I'm the Chief People Officer for Medigold. I've been with Medigold for about 3 years now. Prior to that, I worked in the charity sector and in corporately. And actually, I know Medigold from about 14 years ago when Alex sold the services to me. So I've been a customer of Medigold as well.
Toby?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Very nice to be here with you all. My name is Dr. Toby Donati, and I'm an occupational health physician here at Medigold Health, where my main responsibilities include complex case management, health surveillance, and workplace drug and alcohol testing as well.
Yep. And then last but not least, Matt.
Toby, great to be here. So my name is Matt Reed. I'm the head of corporate here at Medigold. Been with the organisation about 2 years now. I've worked within occupational health and kind of wider disability access services for over 10 years. And I'm also the host for the discussion today. So should we make a start, I think, Nicole? I think before we start the discussion, we thought it'd be really interesting just to get a little bit of a temperature test as to where the audience is and the sentiment towards occupational health and where they see it fitting as part of their organisation. So this is going far too well. Popped up on your screen there are 5 choices for you to have a look at. So we're going to keep it open for about a minute and then we'll look at the results. So if you could take some time to choose just one of the options there. So how do you see the role of occupational health in the workplace with your current occupational health provider, for those obviously that do have a provider in place? So just select one and then we'll keep it open for another 30 seconds or so. And then we'll take a look at the results. So hopefully one of those will feel like you. It'd be really interesting to see the sentiment of those in the audience today. We'll give it another 10 seconds or so, if that's okay, Nicole. Should be plenty of time for people to make a choice. Okay, so do you want to close out and bring up the results if we can, Nicole? Oh, fantastic. Really interesting. So I think it's really heartening to see actually that we'd expect a decent proportion are using the service to see it as something that you use when it goes wrong. Similarly, something from a compliance or risk management, which is not uncommon, but also really from a positive perspective, there's a large proportion that see it as an extension of HR and more importantly, a proactive partner, which is fantastic. And that's a great lead into the discussion for today, really. So Nicole, do you just want to bring up the first slide, if that's okay? Before we start the discussions in earnest and get the panel earning the supper, as it were, we thought it'd be really useful for us just to take a look at a sample of some key stats that we've taken. So these have come from a variety of different areas, including the Society of Occupational Medicine, CIPD, Deloitte, to name but a few. And this kind of paints a picture really of the sector and its perception as it stands. So interestingly enough, our poll itself is a little bit higher than this, but still a large proportion of organisations still see occupational health purely as a reactive service. Despite that, and what we're seeing with our clients and in the market certainly, is that the long-term sickness and the impact of long-term sickness absence is increasing year on year, and the last year is no different. There's still key challenges that exist. Mental health is an obvious one, and that's something that I think has gained a lot more traction, but it's still an area that needs to be picked up on. And the actual physical cost to a business for long-term absenteeism and also presenteeism, which is a real challenge to workplaces as well, and something that's just starting to be discussed, still stands at well over £1,000 per employee, which is a huge challenge to all businesses, regardless of the size. And interestingly, the research that we've done and from speaking to clients, still, when we look at HR as a key stakeholder, nearly half of them still they don't engage OH as a strategic partner. So they're only looking to engage OH once there's a problem, and often when it becomes critical. And that kind of leads us into the discussion, because what we want to pick up on today, and hopefully give you some key takeaways and some interesting food for thought around how can you get more from occupational health? How can you start to look at it in a different light and really start to drive value from a service that most organizations are starting to really appreciate? Okay, so let's start with the first topic. So I think our experience, and it'd be interesting to see what the panel think, is that despite occupational health coming on leaps and bounds over the last sort of 10 to 15 years, we feel that it's still quite misunderstood. And there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to occupational health, what it is, what it does, and more importantly, how it should be used. So, Katie, I'm going to start with you. As the Chief People Officer, what do you see the biggest misconception that exists around occupational health?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And I think I look at a lot of forums as well in the HR community, with both employees and with people from HR kind of making recommendations. And what I see a lot of the time, and it's interesting what you said there about occupational health being engaged sometimes when it's just too late and when the relationship is broken down with the employee as well. And from the employee's perception, you often see that maybe they see it as a kind of punishment, that the employer is trying to dismiss them, that it's really a way for them not to be treated well, and they don't understand that actually it can be used to support them. And sometimes when I read what they've said within there, I think HR or the manager, the employer, are trying to actually support that individual, but their perception of that isn't always there. And I think a big part of that is that it's just too late in the process that they're often engaged.
Thanks, Katie. Toby, if we look at it from the clinical side, from your perspective as a clinician, what OH myths would you like to bust for good?
Well, there's absolutely a few that are very common in the referrals and the employees that we see. So it's great to have a chance to squash a few of these. I think the main one is regarding the thought that occupational health is only regarding sickness absence, and it's only regarding whether someone's fit for work or not. And in fact, we can offer a lot more, and it's a lot more to do with the general wellness of the workforce from an earlier stage, hopefully keeping people healthy and safe in work before they get to the stage of being absent due to sickness. We also have a lot more to offer, if I can say so myself, than just health advice. So there is a common misconception that we are company doctors, where in fact we are impartial and we advocate for the worker, but also for the employer in an impartial fashion. And we are experts in risk and work as well as health.
Thanks, Toby. Alex, from someone who spends a lot of your time out there speaking to clients, trying to understand and ensure that the business is delivering for them, what's your opinion on this?
I think it's changing a lot, which is a good thing. So, if you'd have asked me this question 10 years ago, I would have given an answer along the lines of that occupational health as a sort of concept isn't considered at the right level in businesses that we deal with. So I would have said that it was a sort of a tick box exercise that tended to be used when businesses felt they had an issue in a reactive way, and we would be sort of sent in at a various level of decision making, normally a lower level of decision making, to fix problems that have occurred. That's changing. So I think now it's much more a strategic conversation at board level. Health and well-being in the workplace is now something that even 5 years ago, before COVID, was an any other business agenda item in board meetings if you're lucky, and it's now in the middle of the board papers that people are dealing with around strategy. Businesses are finally realizing that actually taking good care of your people and wanting them to be well plays into retention and into attracting the best people and into producing better productivity in your business. So I think actually, rather than saying what's the misconception, I put a positive spin it and say I think for years it was ignored or given a tick box or paid lip service to, and finally, because of a combination of statistics being available, technology improving, and awareness, businesses are now starting to have the conversation that they need to be having at strategic level. CEOs, CFOs, chief people officers are now coming to meetings. I've got relationships as the CEO of Medigold with more senior people in customers than I've had ever before. But it's a journey and we're not there yet. And I think that's when we can start having the conversations that Toby alluded to around, for instance, are you involving occupational health in your procurement strategy for equipment you're buying, or plants you're building, or buildings you're designing? Because actually you could be hurting the staff, your future staff, without realizing it because you're not talking to the right people ahead of time. Those conversations would never have happened 15 years ago. So it's positive. It's moving in the right direction. Could move faster.
Fantastic. And as you said yourself, it's a journey that organisations are on, and those that are on it and are starting to reap the benefits, it's a bit of a no-brainer. But if we look at what research is telling us and what the stats are saying, that the majority of organisations aren't using occupational health in that way. If you were to look at it as what's the reasons to do that, what I suppose is the business case for an organisation starting to look at things a little bit more differently? As a leader of a business, what do you see the real value of using OH more strategically is, Alex?
Well, linking to what I just said, now that strategic leaders of businesses are starting to understand what it can do, for me as a leader and as someone who does my job, if I'm really breaking it down into what my job is as CEO, on the purest sense, yes, I've got shareholders to look after, and I've got products to build, and I've got customers to keep happy and look after, and I've got lots of things that typically you'd think a CEO would care about. But actually, when it really breaks down, I've got to look after my people. Like, that's the most important thing, any CEO, because actually, if your people are happy and well, your customers are going to be looked after. They're going to get a great product. Therefore, the financials will look after themselves and the shareholders will be happy. So if you don't have happy people or engaged people, or more importantly, healthy people, because they're unlikely to be happy and engaged if they're not healthy, then you're trying to build a city on foundations made of sand. So for me, the biggest single, value of occupational health can be helping businesses retain and keep healthy their staff. So they're not spending money on finding new ones because they broke the old ones. They're actually spending money on the ones they've got, enthusing them and trying to show them that they care, because that's a human thing. So people, basically, and it's an obvious thing, but for years and years and years, businesses didn't prioritize those things.
Alex, you're right. I think everyone agrees people are the biggest asset to any business, and it does sound simple to make that change. But Katie, building on that, obviously people drive and are driven by culture of an organisation. And what role do you see occupational have in either shaping that culture, or do you actually feel that the culture of a business will impact on how OH is and can be used?
Yeah, I think actually, well, let's just take this back a step to the employees again, and how we want to make sure the employees are engaged. And we know that engaged employees are more productive, and having good conversations with individuals means that they are engaged. And if you put yourself in the shoes of somebody who may have had a recent diagnosis and just looking for support, for example, then actually a good conversation early on and intervention at an earlier stage will make them more engaged and make them more happy. And if they're not, and you know, we know that people go down the pub and have a conversation with their friends about how they're feeling, and other people will talk to them as well and say, well, you should be getting more support. It's not motivating if you're not getting support from your employer. But if you are having good conversations, and a theme that I'm going to talk about throughout is managers and kind of training managers, and that part of the occupational health journey is for managers to be talking to individuals about what occupational health means for them and the support that it can offer. But I definitely think it does shape the culture, because employees, if they're more engaged, they're more productive, they're more healthy at work, and ultimately you have a happier team and everybody wants to be here. And where does that lead to at board level? That leads to better productivity stats and absence stats.
Great, thanks, Katie. Toby, I think someone who's obviously operating at the coalface, as it were, and working with customers and with clients as well, looking at this from a positive perspective, we know that there are organisations out there that are using occupational health more strategically. From a clinical perspective, where that is happening, what do you see the impact on the actual outcomes of a service? How is it improving the service, I suppose, for businesses?
I think that's a really key point, and we know that there are some major clinical upsides, so it's not just a business case economically. The sort of clinical outcomes that we would see with a more strategic approach would include shorter episodes of absence, so earlier returns to work, which is obviously operationally a really critical KPI. And then we would see fewer people progressing along their sickness absence journey. So with earlier and more strategic involvement of OH, we could reduce the rate of people progressing through to long-term incapacity and even ill health retirement, keeping people safe and well in the workplace and contributing to the employment. We also see in terms of performance, so the employees that are in the workplace, we would typically see improved performance, reduced presenteeism, to make sure that the people that are in the workplace are effective and contributing in the best way that they can.
Thanks, Toby. So I think we kind of talked about why you do it. And again, we know that there are organisations already well on the journey and some that are really starting to see the benefits. But if we focus again on those organisations that are thinking about making the change, maybe it's been sat on the too difficult to do pile for a while, it'd be really good to explore how organisations can start to make that shift from a purely reactive service to something that's more embedded and used as a more of a strategic business tool. So again, Alex, I'm going to come to you as a leader of a business who has the same pressures and strains that other organisations do. How do you start to make that change, and what are the stages you might want to go through?
If it's a new customer, you know, which we're sort of assuming you are in that scenario, because it's rare you'd have a customer that's using you for a long time but isn't really using you. I mean, it does exist, but it's rare. I think you'd start with trying to understand more about what they're seeing on a wider basis in terms of the trends in their workforce. So how is retention? How is absenteeism? Is it patterned? Do they have different issues in different areas? Does it depend on job role? Are there any particular environmental issues that in the job that they're in that affect, you know, some of these health conditions they're seeing, or trends in absence or trends in behavior within the workforce? How's morale? You know, if businesses are keeping an employee promoter score, you know, how is that going? Is there a general cultural issue, or is it just that they've got a great culture but people aren't generally very, very, you know, fit and healthy? Because you've got to start from a baseline. You've got to understand what the problems are. You can't say to a business, be more proactive with the way you look at health and well-being and employee and occupational health, and not know your benchmark, your sort of bench, you know, your sort of starting point. So I'd ask questions, and I'd ask all those things I've just said. I'd ask what stats they've got, what data do they have, what other providers are they using, what they can get data from. And then from there, really, we just look at the areas where there's issues and try and get to the root cause of those issues. And I mentioned earlier, it could be around environment. So when you're procuring equipment, when you're procuring machinery, when you're looking at the tools you're giving people to use, are they the best for their health? Because actually, if they're not, then they're going to be damaging your people, and you're going to be doing reactive things to fix them down the line. In the same way, Katie mentioned management. If you've got a toxic managerial culture in parts of the business, a good example might be, for instance, a sales environment, a really aggressive sales environment might be super successful, could be based on penalties or targets, or a lot of carrot, a lot of stick for these salespeople, but actually in a call center environment, but it just could be relentless, and it might be achieving one aim, which is results, but at the expense of health and well-being. So could we find a way proactively to work with that business to achieve both those things, and actually bring in our clinicians to consult on how managers should behave? In your area of expertise, Matt, neurodiversity issues that we're looking at. Can we bring in neurodiversity superpowers into businesses rather than seeing them as hindrances and things that hold people back? So I just think really just trying proactively to look at the truth of it, and then try and get people to go back one step and go, what's the cause of these things, and can we do things much more ahead of time to create an environment that doesn't cause illness and disease?
And it's really difficult to say, and I don't expect to give an accurate answer here, but this sounds very much like it's a long-term challenge, a long-term opportunity, really. How long would you think, for an organisation that's relatively new to using occupational health, or has been using it as a box-ticking exercise, how long before they can start to realise those benefits? If we're looking kind of like a small to medium size.
I mean, look, small to medium sized enterprise, less than 1,000, less than 500 people within a year. Bigger, longer than that, year to 2 years, maybe 3. There's definite evidence for occupational health that if you can really learn as a provider about the culture, the environment, the idiosyncrasies, we're going to talk later on, I'm sure, about adjustments and that kind of thing, but learning what businesses can and can't accommodate for adjustments can take years to get right. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly if you're an SME and you're starting from a standing start, and you've got a good culture anyway, and you do other things well, certainly within 6 months to a year, you could have totally transformed the environment. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alex. Toby, again, looking from a clinical perspective, and again, this isn't an ideal world. I appreciate that, which often isn't realistic. But where would you think occupational health and a provider as such would sit as part of a wider business structure when it is working well?
I think it's really moving away from a transactional referrals in one direction and reports back in the other direction model that is maybe the more historic way that OH was set up as an external function, to a more of a true partnership approach where OH is more integrated at different levels of the business. That can work in many different ways, but I think at the basic level is involving OH at a much earlier stage in many different areas of the business. So be that procurement, people strategy, health and wellbeing strategies, all the way through to absence management policies, and using the expertise that we have here, not just clinically, but in workplace risk as well, to help inform your processes and policies. A good example of that would be having a named medical lead or chief medical officer for your business, who can be your named clinical lead, who can help with these types of policies and giving expertise on complex case management, for example, holding case conferences, and getting involved in these types of discussions regarding procurement.
Toby, can I just jump in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think you've just hit the nail on the head. But I think in the part, people might be watching this go, well, we've done case conferencing and we've had CMOs in the past. And I think procurement exercises can go out that list a CMO, certain number of sessions in a year agreed, or maybe it gets very transactional. What we're really talking about is inviting people that have got that title and have got that, honor, to your internal meetings, to your strategy meetings, to the meetings where you're talking about other things that aren't necessarily into OH, so they can give their input. In the same way that some meetings you might have your legal advisor or your accountant in the meetings, why would you not have health experts in your internal meetings to talk about how you're shaping your business? And I think that's the bit strategically that occupational health has been a supplier-provider relationship, provider-customer relationship. What we should be start to be seen as is consultants and partners who get involved. You wouldn't talk. I'll try to give you another example. Businesses wouldn't have a complex discussion about buying another business or an acquisition debate without bringing in their M&A specialist. They would bring them in for that conversation and ask their opinion. There's lots of decisions that get made in businesses at HR level, but also at CFO level, at the CEO level, where you don't ask the opinion of the health people until afterwards when they go, all right, we'll try and unpick this and fix it for you. But if you're involved from the beginning, I think that's the key. So when we're signing up contracts and putting in CMO time, let's actually use that time and remember that as the customers to ask for it, and we should remember as a supplier to offer it easier.
Absolutely, and this can be a good ROI if desking's being procured, computer equipment, machinery. If mistakes are made and the wrong specifications ordered, that's going to have a detrimental impact on employees. To undo that and unpick it is going to be a lot more complicated later on. So I think there is definitely legs on the concept of involving us much earlier on.
Yeah,
absolutely. No, really interesting. And I think following on from that, Katie, I think there's this theme coming through really strongly around business partnering and building that relationship and trusting the experts to help inform decisions. But from your perspective, how do you think OH can influence wider business policy and, I suppose, process as well?
Yeah, so I think leading on from that, what is a good role for HR in this is looking at your absence data. What's your reasons for absence? And for example, if you've got very manual roles and you've got lots of musculoskeletal issues, then you can easily have a conversation with your occupational health partner and ask them what can they do to support, what can they advise. They could probably come out and do a site visit to see as well. So identifying those areas, it might be mental health, you might have high cases of mental health, and engaging with occupational health more of a strategic level rather than just the individual cases to talk to them about you've seen these themes and what can we do more to support the individuals. So I think it's going to be different for every organisation because every organisation has different reasons for absence. They have different employees experiencing different things in the workplace and different working environments. But keeping individuals in work and productive is what we want to do. And I think, HR can help with that by identifying the reasons for absence and working with the OH providers on resolving those and looking to be more proactive.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, that concept of one of the key outcomes of occupational health being helping people be happier, healthier, more productive in work, and key to that is this concept of workplace adjustments or reasonable adjustments. And I think it's often misunderstood, but often a lot of organisations are frightened or spend a lot of time and still, I suppose, get it wrong. So if we think about workplace adjustments as a concept and I suppose as an opportunity, Katie, to make a real impact, what are some of the challenges that you feel from a HR and a people perspective that business face with this concept of workplace adjustments?
I think one of them, the first one is probably managers often see that workplace adjustments can be difficult to implement and they can take time, and sometimes adjustments might be lower productivity, for example. And the way that the adjustments are perceived, rather than looking at it really positively in that supporting individuals and giving them the adjustments keeps them in work, enables them to be supported and to fulfill their roles successfully as well. So I think it's really trying to coach people on why the adjustments are needed, but getting the adjustments in as early as possible. It can just be all too late when someone's disgruntled already, they've not had the right equipment that they need. Sometimes it can take a long time to order things as well, and you don't always get it right first time if it's equipment based. But I think that's where going back to asking the right questions of occupational health, and I couldn't not have today's call without saying ask the right questions, because of often with reports you the quality of what you get from a report is as good as the questions that you ask. If you're not given the right information, and I'm sure Toby can talk more about this, but yeah, if you're not given the right information to occupational health, then you don't get the right information back. But when you get the right information, it's good information, and you talk to the individual about it and what adjustments they need, then they're positive, it's successful, and you're keeping them in work, which is what we want them to do. And again, it's around the engagement of the individual.
Do you still, I think it's absolutely right. I think, do you still feel that there's work to be done? Because I think people obviously relate workplace adjustments to more often than not, people who've got a disability or a long-term health condition that's impacting them in work, so not necessarily off sick as such. But within that, there's obviously this whole concept of hidden impairments, and if you can't see a disability, then obviously someone's not disabled or isn't struggling in work. Do you think there's still work to be done around that in an organisation? Because that's a blocker, isn't it, to getting access to those adjustments, I suppose?
Yeah, it's a big blocker. And also people don't necessarily want to share what their impairment may be. So create an environment where people feel comfortable because they feel that they're going to be supported. And this comes back to, if they feel that they're going to have a good conversation, be a referral to occupational health where that's a good conversation, and that they work together with their manager on what that report looks like, on what the referral looks like. They speak to occupational health, they come back, they have another good conversation, and then those adjustments put in place. Unfortunately, people are scared that that's not going to be what happens, and they'll be discriminated against. So culturally, there's a lot, and we started at the beginning of this call talking about does it impact culture or not? Yeah, it does. You need to get the culture right, and it's all a cycle.
Absolutely, no, couldn't agree more. Toby, from your perspective, this role of being able to help businesses and individuals access the right adjustments quickly and in the right way, where do you see OH being able to help HR, often alongside managers, the key stakeholder in this process? Where can you help more?
I think the main value, Matt, is translating the employee's medical issue and their functional limitations into a suggested set of adjustments that would help them remain in the workplace and perform effectively. It's not always an easy job to translate their medical issue into these adjustments that would be suitable, would help them. I think that's key part of the OH clinician's job, but we have to remember it's a co-produced set of adjustments. So it doesn't just require the input of the OH physician or clinician, but it involves the information coming from the employer via their referral, which is really, really key, as Katie was mentioning. And it's co-produced with the worker or the employee as well. We have to be realistic in terms of operationally what adjustments are going to be workable, but also with the worker or employee, we have to make sure that the adjustments suggested are acceptable to them and they feel they would help them. Most people are the expert in their own job and their own health condition, so I think it really is a key part of the process for adequate time to discuss the adjustments with the individual. But we need to know about their job, and we need to know in enough detail to make a decision about what sort of adjustments might help. So an example here would be a job description that often is provided with a referral. It may be from 5 years ago, maybe from 10 years ago. It may have their job at the time in a job advert sense, but what I really want to know when I'm speaking to someone is, what do they do day in, day out? How long do they spend doing each task? What does it involve? What's their location? So it's often very helpful to have just a short and concise description of what they actually do in their job now. And that can be so helpful and powerful in producing adjustments that will be useful for the person and also feasible operationally.
And it does very much come back to the point that Katie made in her answer and earlier on about the importance of culture and people understanding what the aim of an occupational health service and an assessment is, that it's there to help, not some, I think Katie described it as some form of punishment, which often is often the perception, isn't it, which is unhelpful. Thanks, Toby. Alex, one of the key challenges around workplace adjustments, and again, I think this comes often to a misconception, but adjustments are going to be costly, they're going to be difficult, and obviously organizations now more than ever have to look at after the bottom line. But again, putting your business leader hat on, how do you evaluate the potential cost of an adjustment, whether it's physical purchase of equipment or change to working patterns or whatever that might be, versus the wider benefit that this can bring to, obviously, to the individual, but then to the wider business?
Yeah, this is a really meaty topic, isn't it? Even the term reasonable adjustments, if I put my employer CEO hat on versus my OH, advocate hat on, I sometimes get a bit conflicted with this. I actually think reasonable adjustments is an unhelpful term in a way. We're using the word reasonable because it's always been, well, reasonable to who? And sometimes you can have a massive difference of opinion of what's reasonable or not, whether you're the employee or the person holding the purse strings in the business. I think maybe a better term might be suitable adjustments, because sometimes you can ask for all sorts of things, but they're just not doable. And I go to customer meetings and hear the frustration when we've done reports which just propose things that are just not doable. And not only they're not doable, it then creates even more problem for the customer, because they then got an expectation to accommodate that. So it's almost made it worse. I'd just like to reassure everybody actually that, I run an occupational health business, and I've had in my time from an OH provider, for me, a suggestion that we, for instance, as a reasonable adjustment, wouldn't send certain type of mental health cases to a certain individual who worked for me. Now, clearly, as someone who runs an occupational health business, that's not very easy to do, because most of the things we see are mental health problems these days. So that's not in any way a reasonable adjustment, but I do understand why it was suggested, because in that particular instance, it caused that person problems, and it made them worse. So it's a complicated thing. I think what we have to try and get to is a scenario where everybody's reasonable about it. And when we say reasonable, I mean everybody, and they all try and work on a very proactive way. I think where you're going wrong with adjustments is where it becomes combative. So an employer or employee demanding certain things which are well beyond what's required or what actually would work, and an employer that then causes employers to retrench and not give the things they should do. Where we're getting it right is if it's collaborative in the way Toby described. We come together as a team. This comes back to what we talked about earlier, where bringing OH closer in, having case conferencing, having group conversations, often in the room, potentially with the manager and the employee, to agree what works if in certain situations where it's difficult to get to the right balance. And I think overall, this could be helped by the proactive theme we talked earlier. So then I think there's lots of instances where people, when they join a business through the pre-employment process or through very obvious things that are happening when they first come in, if employers were looking at the right thing, they could see early on that certain adjustments might be needed, and certain help and change to targets, change to equipment, change to environment, change to working hours, sometimes minor ones, would actually stop someone going off sick in the first place. Adjustments are always loads more emotional when someone's already gone off sick and has had a period of absence, and there has been a referral created. If occupational health could be used to come in and consult with people before they've got an issue, to give them the perfect work environment or a good work environment by making adjustments, I think that you'd get better outcomes and more collaboration. So and so as a business owner, I do understand the frustration with it sometimes, having to make adjustments that just seem really difficult to accommodate, and certainly some you just can't do them, and they shouldn't have been suggested. And that's where occupational health needs to be better. We can be better by being closer to our customers and talking more often, and really understanding, and not just doing it once when you win the contract, but speaking regularly about, has anything changed? Are there things now? Are there alternative roles? Are there things that we can now accommodate? Are your working patterns the same? I mean, even in the last 2 years, flexible working's changed massively as a concept across the globe. So that might have changed in certain situations, but as an example. But I can see you could talk about it. You could have a whole podcast just on this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think there's kind of two themes, not just related to workplace adjustments, but across this whole concept. One is that concept of business partnering and collaboration, and the other is this concept of culture. Katie, you mentioned it earlier. about creating that environment, that safe space, that psychological safety, a lot of people call it, for people to put the hand up knowing that they'll get that support. And that's right from day one. But also, as you said, Alex, that concept around understanding from a business perspective what's going to be achievable and sustainable, so that you're managing expectations from day one, so that you're not suggesting things that then chuck it over the wall to a manager to pick up, knowing that they're not going to be able to do it, because we know that that's a recipe for disaster. Brilliant. No, I think really interesting, and we'll maybe come back to look at those in the Q&A if we can. So we're going to change tact a little bit now. So I'm giving you all a magic wand here. So we're going to solve all the problems around occupational health in one foul swoop. So if you could make any change tomorrow to improve OH engagement and therefore the benefit to organisations, just one change you could make and it would click my fingers and it'd be done, what would it be? Toby, I'm going to come to you first of all. Really simple question.
I'm going to loop back to referrals here. And I think it's really important to talk about this in detail, because we rely on the referral to receive information, all of the information from the employer regarding the current situation, the role and the job. And there's a huge difference from a more basic referral to something that's detailed and has been thought through and care has been taken over it. I think a referral ideally should be co-produced with the employee, and they should be done in a conversational way rather than just done as a transaction and sent off. It's incredibly helpful for the employee to have had input into their referral and to also know the reason that they're being referred. And it's much easier to get off on the right track on an appointment when everyone's on the same page, the employer who's referred, the employee, and also the occupational health clinician. So I think making sure key details are on there and really getting to the crux of the issue in a referral. So what is the key question that we are being asked about? Is it, can they return to the office to work in some form? Is it, will they ever come back to the workplace? Is it whether or not work actually caused their health issue? Often we, as OH clinicians, do a lot of reading through the lines to work out what's going on. It helps everyone if the referral is clear and upfront about what's going on, and the employee is also briefed on that. And the final point I would add would be regarding the adjustment. So as Alex has talked about just recently, some adjustments are not operationally feasible, and it's really very helpful to know that with the referral at that stage. So if there are certain adjustments that you have already thought about that you could offer, note that down. If there's adjustments that are not going to be workable at all due to the demand of that particular role or the operational requirements, include that as well. Because if we know that, we won't recommend things that are not going to be feasible. So that would be my kind of wish list, Matt, to have every OH referral prepared by the right person at the right time, sent in a timely way as well, at the right point in their health issue, and to start every appointment on the right foot with all the information there.
Easy. Done. Not a problem. Yeah. We'll make that happen. Katie, what's your thoughts?
Mine's just a step back to get to where Toby wants everybody to be. So mine would be educating managers. So if we think about if the managers can explain to somebody why they should go to occupational health and the benefits of it at an early stage, but the managers need to know. So I think when we think about, if you think about absence management training that you may have delivered as a HR professional or received as a manager, often it's to make sure that you're having the right welfare calls, that you're checking in with people need to ring up and not text, etc., making sure they're following the process. But do you have information in there about occupational health and the value of occupational health and the reasons for using it, and also how to do a good referral? If you include that in your absence management training, then you're going a long way to educating the manager. So that would be my magic wand.
So knowledge and confidence.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Alex, this should be interesting. What's your number one wish?
I hope it's interesting. What is my number one wish? It's kind of, I think the UK is a really unique environment for health and wellbeing in the workplace, driven by a load of factors, mainly around, bluntly, that when we're born in this country since 1948, we're told that health isn't our problem because we get looked after by somebody else, i.e. the NHS. And that tends to create a sort of lack of responsibility on the part of individuals and organizations in general, that health isn't our problem. That's really, it was an amazing thing, but I'm not dissing the NHS at all. It's a brilliant organization. But it was great. It was a great idea when and Aaron Bevan started it in 1948, because it was a real fill up for the country. The unintended consequence was that health is everyone else's problem. So I think if I could change one thing, I would try and flip it around to employers to feel genuinely that the health of their people is their problem, and their responsibility. And if that happens, then at the very highest level of all organizations, it will be on the agenda. So I would be able to pick up the phone to any customer CEO and go, did you know that X, Y, Z? I've seen the stats, and by the way, you might want to consider it. And if I had, honestly, the amount of times we do occasionally, often through distressed circumstances, I do end up speaking to someone senior, either because there's been a problem or because they're doing something strategic, or there's some other reason why they don't. It's not normally a matter of fact. We then get into a really positive conversation about what we could do and how we could do it and what more we could do. And there's often especially in large organizations, there's layers of bureaucracy and people and agendas underneath the leadership that kind of end up diluting the message, and all this good stuff we've talked about doesn't happen, and we end up just doing what the procurement exercise of 3 years ago told us that we needed to do. So I think if I had a magic wand, it would be to sort of rearrange priorities in people's heads around whose job it is to look after their people. And it's not the job of the government or the NHS, although there is lots the government. I nearly answered this question with, if I had a magic wand, I'd make it legislatively compulsory, like as they do in places like Holland and other places where businesses they get fined if they don't look after the health of their people. We're not there yet. But I would certainly like to wave the magic wand and have people really thinking about it in a much more proactive way at the highest level.
Perfect. Thank you, Alex. I think that's a great place to finish at least the topic and the discussion element of this. So we've left a little bit of time for Q&A, because I've seen as we've been going through questions popping in. So hopefully we'll have as much time as we can to do that. But Nick, do you just want to pop up the last slide?
Yeah, I didn't know if you still wanted to go ahead with that, Max. We have got an awful lot of questions from the audience.
Yeah, fine. We can move on to the questions. Yeah, let's start with those.
So just for the audience's benefit, we've got a little sort of top takeaway slide, but what I'll do is we'll pop that in the follow-up email, so you can click in the email and you can find the top takeaways there. I just think we've got quite a lot of really decent questions. Thank you so much to our audience. So I've popped. Do you want me to read them out, or do you want you to?
I've got them here, Nick.
You've got them there. Brilliant. Far away.
So the first question, I think this is probably going to be more for Toby, at least to start with, and then maybe to see what Katie thinks. So this is from one of the audience. So in our company, we seem to have a specific type of issue we are facing. As a matter of interest, what are the most common health issues you're seeing in the workplace right now? So I'm going to come to you, Toby, first of all, and then Katie, see if you've got any thoughts to add.
So currently in the UK, mental health issues are the number one reason for sickness absence or workplace performance issues. This was a fairly recent change within the last kind of 10 years. Prior to that, musculoskeletal issues were more common, so things like back pain, limb pain, but we have seen kind of wholesale change there. Mental health issues are very common, either as a primary reason for referral, but also very commonly as a secondary or additional issue, complicating a physical health problem.
An interesting look at mental health. There's been a huge amount of work done to raise the profile and bring it more into the mainstream, so there's less of a stigma attached. Are you seeing that changing, Toby? You think it's having a positive impact?
I think people are much more prepared now to talk about their mental health. So there's been some great work, by numerous different charities, public figures, to speak about their own mental health issues in the public arena, which I think has normalized that for the general public. And that's been really helpful. I think younger people now are very au fait with speaking about their mental health, and we have a whole new kind of dialect that we hear in terms of therapy speak, not all of it being necessarily helpful, but I think that shows that especially younger people are much more willing to open up about their mental health. And in an occupational health consultation, it, for me, forms a topic of discussion for anyone presenting with a physical health issue, because we know there's a very close interplay between your physical and mental health. So it's extremely common for somebody with a physical health problem like chronic pain or cancer to be struggling with their mental health. So everything is related in that sense.
100%. Katie, any of your thoughts in regard to some of the real key challenges that you've seen in the workplace?
Well, I'm going to agree with Toby around the mental health, but actually, I think I went to a HR leaders meet on Friday with some employment lawyers, and one of the topics of discussion was around employment tribunal claims. And what they were saying is that an awful lot of the claims that they see come through now have some kind of mental health element to it. So even if it's not the primary reason to the claim, there's a mental health element to that as for part of the reason. And I'm going to just jump ahead slightly, Matt, to one of the questions that I've seen, if that's okay, about how if the board don't want to pay for occupational health. So if kind of, funds are tight and they don't see the value of it. And actually, sometimes if you look at some of the tribunal cases and the case studies that are out there, it's expensive to get it wrong. And actually, again, the mental health, some of the discrimination, it's not capped for discrimination, that there's high awards to some cases, and it's worth looking at those and using those to demonstrate this is what happens if we get it wrong.
And also,
go on, Alex.
No, I was going to say, it's not just that. I mean, you're right, and it's not just tribunal cases. There's so many other unseen costs that you'll have if you don't spend money in at least a very rudimentary way on this stuff. And if anyone's written that and wants to reach out after the webinar privately to talk to me or Nicole, and we've got plenty of other people, you, Kate, obviously, about the messages to give to your board if they're saying we can't afford it, I could spend hours talking about that to anybody who wants to listen. Sorry, Katie, I interrupted you. Had you finished?
I think that's it. I think we can move on to the next question if you want. I'm conscious of time as well. We've got a lot of questions to get through.
Well, yeah. So I think this is a really interesting one, and I'm going to come to you with this, Alex. This concept of strategy, being strategic, is often, I think, organisations think it's only reserved for big organisations. So if you look at it from an SME business, how can small businesses start to work more effectively with occupational health when they don't have huge budgets?
Yeah. So, small businesses until very recently didn't actually know what it was in most cases. And in fact, even now, it's a journey. So I think it's something like over 94% of all UK businesses, over 1,000 people in them, have occupational health in some form or other. And actually, I suspect it's higher than that, but that's the stat. I think it's, businesses with less than 100 people in, I think it's only about 15% of those even use it in some degree or other. So they rely on GPs and other things than the NHS. So I think, first of all, it's about awareness. We need to do a better job. And that's on the government as well as the private sector to really promote what occupational health is to the businesses that employ a small amount of people. The irony being that businesses with fewer people in get massively affected by ill health and absence, because they're in larger businesses, you can normally get somebody else to pick up the slack. But in a business where you've got 10 people and 2 of your key people have got a long-term issue, it's really damaging. So, and actually occupational health for that level of business doesn't have to cost the world. You can do it for less than a cup of coffee per day, per employee. Businesses now, Medigold included, but others do it, offer a more of an insurance style provision where we'll cover them for whatever they need throughout the year on an ad hoc basis for a fee that's upfront, but it's like an insurance policy in case, which is still less than many of the things they'd be paying out for other things that seem more mainstream. So it's about awareness and about creating a commercial model that the small businesses can understand, know that they've budgeted for, and is consistent and there's no shocks down the line. So that's definitely doable.
Thanks, Alex. I'm gonna move on. We've probably got time for another 1 or 2 questions. So, Kate, I'm going to come to you with this, and this kind of plays into the point that you made around the recognizing OH being used not necessarily as a stick and more as an opportunity to help people. So, this is one of the questions that's come from the audience. So, how can OH help managers understand the difference between performance issues and unmet neurodiversity needs? And I'm going to extend it outside of neurodiversity. I think that's is something that is becoming more and more prevalent, and we're seeing certainly as an organisation. But how do you define the difference before it gets to, I suppose, to performance management, and what can OH do about that?
Yeah, I think the important thing is around regular conversations. So if you have got monthly one-to-ones, if you've got at Medigold, we've got a quarterly review process for appraisals and then monthly meetings. One of the questions within that is whether somebody needs any adjustments, or if they've got adjustments, how are those adjustments going? Because actually someone might have an adjustment and it might have been right 6 months ago and it isn't anymore. Things change, their health changes. So I think to be having the regular conversations in the first place, and the right conversations, and for the manager to have the confidence to ask the individual if they need adjustments, and if it's or whether, and also if they're not performing, ask them in the right way what's leading to them not performing. I think what you see a lot is that managers just don't want to have the conversation, full stop. And then again, it comes back to, we go right back to where we started at the beginning of this. It's all too late, and then it's all a big buzz of you don't know what's performance, what's the individuals, that they need adjustments that might help. So I think regular conversations, and what if you have left it too late, it's never too late. Take a step back and just have those conversations. I think and if there's a HR people on this call, I'm sure that you've all had a call from a manager that says that it's just not working and you need to deal with this. Well, actually, no, you need to stop thinking about the speed just for a minute and just have a conversation with the individual and understand why, and try and differentiate what's performance and what may be, for example, something that's relating to their neurodiversity.
Great, thanks, Katie. Toby, I'm going to come to you with a question, and I think I already know the answer, but I think it's going to be worth asking anyway. So Benjamin in the audience has asked us, do you think that the recommendations made by OH tend to reflect what the employee wants rather than what they need?
It's a really interesting thought, and I can see why a manager may think that after receiving a report. I think we strike a careful balance in OH in terms of recommending, taking an employee's thoughts and feelings on board, but being impartial and balanced in terms of providing advice. So the report and the advice should always be carefully balanced. We do take on information from an employee regarding what adjustments they would feel may be helpful, as often themselves being the expert in what they do day to day and how their health impacts on that, will be able to produce some really strong suggestions. Example, maybe someone that has arthritis and is stiff in the morning, starting work at 10 a.m. instead of 8 a.m. could make the world of difference for them. So we do always listen, but there will be cases where an employee might want to reduce their hours. We would advise that a reduction in hours might be helpful, but we wouldn't advise specifically what day they shouldn't work. So the employee may request a specific day off, but that may be overstepping in terms of balance. So I think it is a careful kind of balancing act, but we always aim to get it right.
And just to add to that, I think that that's I get why that question is asked, and I think we are, at the end of the day, we're humans too, and I think sometimes, if let's not say what it isn't, do we sometimes get misled or led down the garden path by people trying to create for themselves a different role or a better role in their eyes that actually is sort of not needed really when the letter of the law for the health condition? That does happen, of course it does, and our clinicians have to kind of form a judgment. They're half clinicians, half quarter psychologists, quarter detectives. They have to try and work out exactly where the agenda is. Is there one at all? Is the employer expecting too much? Is the employee not putting enough effort in alongside the condition they've got? So I think Toby's right. We try very hard to be balanced. Do we always get it right? No. If we get more information and more collaboration and have a better strategic relationship with the customer, would we have a better chance of getting it right more often? Yes. So that's the direction of travel we need to go.
Thanks, Alex. And I think that's a great place to finish. I'm conscious we've pretty much to time. So the last thing to do before, and apologies if we haven't answered all your questions. We appreciate there's an awful lot that were asked. Really interesting. We'll try to answer those. Nicole,
Yes.
as part of a bit of an FAQ that will follow.
I'll do a FAQ document that will get circulated around. That won't be tomorrow. Tomorrow you'll get a link to the recording and also the top takeaway tips. But with fantastic questions. Thank you so much to our audience for putting them across. So I will collate all of those, get a nice FAQ document out to you. Some wonderful content and guidance document ideas as well. So a big thank you to you all, and also for me as well. Thank you so much for our panel. That was great.
Well, thanks. Well, that's thanks from us to you, Nicole, for arranging it. You always do a good job of facilitating these things. So well done. Thank you.
So
thanks everyone else.
Yeah, we hope to see you. We do run regular webinars on different themes. So hopefully, if this is your first time, it won't be your last. But yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Alex, Katie, and Toby, for your input and thoughts. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks very much.
Well done.
Thanks everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.